Myself, my name is Devin Bella, and I am one of the organizing members of Art and Climate Action. We are a Bay Area-based collective of arts professionals, and we're working together to help museums, galleries, and art spaces lower their climate impact. And so now I'm delighted to introduce Siobhan Bradley, our guest speaker for today's presentation on sustainable exhibition design. She brings a wealth of experience from the art world, having worked in galleries in New York and Frieze before making her mark in Los Angeles at Roberts Project as the Senior Registrar and Sustainability Liaison. Siobhan is deeply committed to climate initiatives. She co-leads Gallery Climate Coalition in Los Angeles and contributes her expertise as a member of the GCC International Shipping Subcommittee. So thanks, Siobhan, for all that you do, for leading the way. She is also currently organizing GCC LA's upcoming event on October 26th at Gagosian in Beverly Hills. The event will feature Simone Paz, who will present on climate change and our industry's impact, along with actionable steps we can take. So now, please join me in welcoming Siobhan Bradley and to her valuable insights on sustainability or sustainable exhibition design. Take it away, Siobhan.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Devin, and thank you for everyone for joining this morning. So today I'm going to be presenting on tips and tricks for sustainable exhibition design. I'm going to be reviewing the ways that our industry typically approaches things, different alternatives, waste reducing solutions to those typical practices. And I'm also going to be providing links to vendors who can provide those alternative practices, products rather. And then we'll have a Q&A in the end, as Devin said. So this presentation isn't a super comprehensive review of every single component that goes into exhibition design. Rather, I'm going to be focusing on areas where we have established waste reducing solutions for. I'm going to be listing off quite a few resources and vendors today. I appreciate that can be kind of difficult to capture on a Zoom. So I am going to drop a small PDF in the chat right now that will give you links to every product and resource that I talk about this morning. Great. So the first step for mounting any exhibition is planning it. There's a saying that time buys you options. And in that respect, step one in exhibition planning is to bring together all departments working on a show as far in advance as possible. When we're rushed to make decisions, there's usually little time to kind of zoom out and make environmentally conscious choices. The less time we have, the less options that are available to us. Simone Paz, a sustainability and circular economy consultant that we work with at GCCLA, who you've likely seen at these meetings previously, recommends hosting a charrette with all parties involved in exhibition planning. A charrette being a meeting wherein all stakeholders come together to establish goals for a project and come up with solutions how to get there. So bringing together your marketing, sales, registration, operations departments is really a great way to get everyone on the same page about what your sustainability goals are for an exhibition. It can also be an opportunity to clarify, different deadlines and criteria that might be more flexible than you imagine without having those kind of conversations. Then we go to fabrication. So when it comes to fabricating artworks and supportive materials for shows, a lot of waste is potentially created when we pursue custom and bespoke options. But there are many alternatives out there for these things. One such item is framing. So not only are custom frames pricey and time intensive to create, but they also create a lot of waste when we're only using them on a temporary basis. So an alternative to making custom frames is to see if your framer might potentially be offering frame rental options. So here in Los Angeles, there is Paradise Framing in Inglewood, and they have started a frame rental program for works on paper, 32 by 24 inches or smaller. And the way it works is you bring Paradise Framing your work on paper, and they will cut a mat custom to your artwork. They'll then put that custom mat into a standardized sized frame. When you're done with the frame, Paradise Framing will remove the mat and the artwork. They'll retain the frame. But if your artwork happens to sell during the course of an exhibition, there's always the option to just buy the frame from Paradise. So not only is this option like 30 to 50% cheaper than custom framing and much faster to produce, but you also get to keep the mat that your artwork comes on, meaning you'll have a really safe archival packing material for your artwork at the end, which can help reduce on your need for packing materials. And I also want to clarify, because I think it's not raised all too often in this conversation, that plexi is a very bad material to be putting into a landfill. So it really is important to reduce frame waste where it's possible. Next, we have plinths and pedestals. So custom plinths and pedestals are another area where we tend to create a lot of waste. An alternative to making a custom plinth or pedestal is to see if your community already has pedestals that you can reuse. And of course, the best vendor for this is barter.art and MuseoCycle, who I have to assume everyone on this call is well familiar with, but in case you are not, Barter is a peer-to-peer resource sharing website, kind of like Craigslist, where you can post materials you're looking to offload and source materials you're trying to find. MuseoCycle is a very similar setup. It is just for vetted museum institutions. And then, of course, there's the more miscellaneous and random material in exhibitions. So if your career has been anything like mine, you've had to find very strange, unique materials very quickly to mount an exhibition. I'm thinking of years ago, I worked on a show where I had to find a taxidermied hyena like 3 days before an opening. So in those instances where you have to find kind of unique things in a moment's notice, I'd love to recommend 2 places here in Los Angeles. One is called EcoSet and the other is Recycled Movie Sets. So what EcoSet is a company that takes in all different types of props and just random materials for production sets, and then rents them out, or you can buy these materials from them. They have everything from like, set components like staging a bedroom for a movie, to plinths and pedestals and crates, to artwork. They have all different types of things, and like really friendly people to work with too. And then there's also recycled movie sets. And recycled movie sets, they are based in Los Angeles, of course, as well. And they rent out mostly props and walls. Thank you, Laura, for clarifying on Barter. So the great thing about all of these options, Barter, EcoSet, recycled movie sets, is that not only are these places where you can source the exhibition material you need, but when it's time to deinstall your exhibition, these are also great places to use to minimize what amount of your material has to go to a landfill or a recycling facility. Okay. Oops, sorry. Oh no. Okay, so then we go to packing and shipping. So now you have all of your elements for your exhibition and you need to get them to your venue. For many arts institutions, we know that packing and shipping is maybe like the biggest contributor that we have to our waste and emissions. So it's important to consider some good alternatives here. Oh my goodness. Sorry, guys. So when it comes to packing materials, we of course want to avoid plastic, and we want to prioritize sustainable companies. Prioritize companies who care about sustainability. So one great example we use here at Roberts Projects is Eco Enclose. They're an online-based company who are a great provider of sustainability-minded packing materials. They've developed this very rigorous vetting system for the materials that they sell, and they come recommended to us by Simone Paz, who I mentioned earlier. And then also, when it comes to packing materials, it's important to be mindful of potential greenwashing. So you might find when you're shopping that materials are listed as recyclable, but they're not actually curbside recyclable. Or they might be noted as being compostable rather, but your municipality might not have the capacity to compost those items. So, I mean, one solution is if you're getting a type of material that says it's recyclable, but it's not curbside, I would recommend looking into a company called Ridwell to see if it's active in your area. Ridwell is a company who specializes in recycling difficult to recycle items, such as like sheet plastic and light bulbs and batteries, all that type of thing. But yes, be mindful of greenwashing in this area. And then, oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. Also try using reusable crates. There are some really great options out there. And to be honest, they're safer than wooden crates that we typically use. There is Rockbox based in the UK, and their product is available for rent through Deedle and Gander and White. There's also Turtlebox, that's a US-based company who's available for purchase or rent through Masterpiece International. And of course, you can always go on Barter and Museo Cycle to see if they have crates that you need too. And also, I'm really excited. I've been talking to a couple shippers lately who seem like they are going to be mounting their own reusable crate programs locally here in Los Angeles. So it seems like this is a growing and expanding option for our sector. Okay, so then when we get to shipping, if you've ever done a carbon report on a shipping, it becomes immediately clear how many emissions are created from shipping and how different the output for road or sea versus air are. So whenever possible, try to prioritize shipping for via sea or road above air. One illustration of this is let's take a 60 by 40 inch painting crated, for example. To fly that artwork from New York to LA creates 0.14 metric tons of carbon, whereas that exact same shipment by road would only create 0.02 metric tons. So like those numbers are a little abstract, like what do they mean? To put that into context, shipping via road for that painting would create the equivalent amount of emissions of driving your car 93 miles. That same shipment over air would create the equivalent of driving over 1,300 miles in your car. So that's really the difference of driving from LA to the Inland Empire versus driving from LA to the middle of Texas. For me personally, it's always helpful to be able to put emissions into context like this. And so when I need to, I use a tool called the Environmental Protection Agency Equivalency Calculator. That's also on the PDF that I dropped in the chat earlier. And I think it can be a great tool in, really illustrating the weight of emissions. Okay, so then you have to install your show now that everything's been packed and shipped to you. When it comes to installing, there are a few tips and best practices to consider. One is try as much as possible to hire local art handlers and technicians and experts to mount your exhibition, as opposed to flying in staff, especially via air. Another tip is to see if materials that your technicians are using that you would usually have to throw out might be eligible for recycling. I'm thinking of Kimberly Clark and TerraCycle, who both offer nitrile glove recycling programs. Okay, opening receptions. So obviously celebratory dinners and opening events are really important things that we do in our sector. And there are some, cost-saving ways to reduce waste here. So for printed materials like priceless invitations, checklists, artist bios, we can use QR codes, rather than printing. And at our gallery, what we actually have done is we've printed one final QR code for our exhibitions, and we reuse the same QR code so that we don't have to reprint vinyl every 6 weeks. If you do have to print materials, which of course you will have to, try prioritizing businesses that are sustainably minded and offer recycled and biodegradable products. One such example here in Los Angeles, who I love and adore, is Indie Printing downtown. They have a wealth of great options to choose from. They're very affordable, high quality, and fast. Okay, then when it comes to food at your events, you should try avoiding meat and dairy and provide vegan options instead. It's been shown that one of the greatest sort of actions we can take as individuals to reduce our impact on climate change is to lean towards a plant-based diet. And even changing like one meal has, it makes a difference. It's a lot less waste, a lot less emissions. I'm running out of time here, but I did want to share a quick quote on a study that was done in the UK. Taking all of the meat eaters in the UK, who they average out eating 3.5 ounces of meat a day, if they were to cut that in half over the course of a year, that would be the equivalent of taking 8 million cars off the road. So it matters. It's a good thing to do. And then for drinks, of course, wine is always served at openings, and it's worth considering sourcing your wine from local wineries, especially those who practice regenerative farming. Here in California, there are so many options, but one that comes to mind immediately is Phelan Farms. And then, of course, you want to avoid single-use plastics. But you also want to be aware of greenwashing in this department as well. One such example, pains me to say, is boxed water. So I see at a lot of events, the little cartons of boxed water being offered. And I think that they're a company who's been pretty successful as marketing themselves as a green option. However, boxed water is made of part plant material, part plastic, which means it cannot be recycled and it cannot be composted. It just goes to a landfill. So, it's so great that companies are developing alternatives to plastic, but at this kind of stage of where we're at, it's just always worth looking into a little further what the end home of these products is. Another thing I'll mention for serveware is you might see like potato based plates, based serveware, based forks. And again, it's so amazing that these alternatives to plastics are being developed. But at this stage, they're not exactly great choices for us here in LA. The reason being our composting facilities here in Los Angeles can't process that serveware. So that means it's just going to a landfill. And the reason that is a problem is because all of the resources that were used to grow that plant material to make this product they're not returning to the earth, they're just going to a landfill. So of course, these things are very likely to change in the coming years. But just try to be like a little mindful of greenwashing when it comes to serveware and just different food serving items. Oh, sorry, I missed my slide there. Then deinstallation. So it's the exhibition's over, it's time to dismount. And what you want to do with your materials, as I mentioned earlier, is just avoid the landfill as much as possible. As mentioned, we have EcoSet, recycled sets, barter art, Museo Cycle. At Roberts Projects, we've had a lot of success working with Habitat for Humanity. Of course, getting things to Habitat for Humanity can be like a little tricky. So there's a great company called Load Up that works all across the US that specializes in doing pickups for donations to charities. And then another thing you can do is contact schools and colleges in your area and see if they might be open to receiving some materials. I have a colleague who is able to rehome an entire exhibition to USC. So all of her exhibition materials avoided the landfill and went to the college. So it's worth just communicating about who's around you that might need materials. Okay, so the conclusion. At the end of the exhibition, I would really recommend doing a carbon report on your emissions. They say we can't reduce what we can't measure, and doing a carbon report is a really great way to know like where you're creating emissions. For this, I would recommend using the GCC carbon calculator. And then next, don't give up. No matter how much planning goes in advance, no matter how great our intentions are, there will be exhibitions or elements of an exhibitions that just can't be done sustainably. And I know from personal experience that can be kind of disheartening, but it's important to not give up in those scenarios and keep using alternatives and knowing that small change does add up, it does matter, it's worth doing, it's worth your time. And then finally, share your resources. If there are companies or products who really helped your team reduce waste and your emissions, share that information with your community. I think that our sector cares deeply for this issue, but I think a lot of people feel like we don't have great options at this time. So getting the word out there about great options, helpful tips and tricks is a really great way to help this cause. And that is my conclusion.
Thanks so much, Siobhan. That was wonderful. So many great tips and resources packed in there. We have about 6 minutes for questions and answers. I will, if anyone has a question, you can put it in the chat or raise your hand or just speak up and we'll go through them. I'm also happy to kind of kick things off with a question and break the ice a little bit. I was wondering, Siobhan, can you talk about your vetting process? So many great resources you provided are connected to the Los Angeles area. And I'm wondering if someone like myself wanted to kind of explore what's available to me locally, like, do you have a list of questions that you could be referring to when you're talking to vendors, or how did you identify the vendors that you're working with?
Sure. That's a great question. And I have to say, and I also acknowledge most of the resources I shared are local here to Los Angeles. So apologies for that. But I have to say that for our vetting, we really worked closely with Simone Paz. I think that when our GCCLA chapter was at first developing resources to share with people, we fell victim to a lot of greenwashing. And when we spoke with Simone Paz, who is a sustainability and circular economy expert, she kind of explained things to us like why bioplastics are not a good option and so forth. So I'm sorry to say this isn't vetting that I've researched myself, but rather have consulted with someone about. And we're lucky to have Simone always like willing to share her time and expertise with us.
Thank you. Let's continue the conversation. Is it Neha?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. My name is Neha. I live on the border of Washington, D.C., and I'm a climate justice advocate. And right now I'm working on my debut, what I like to say, unsolo show, because I don't like the idea of what solo conveys, because it takes a village. This is so incredibly useful. So one, thanks to you and everybody behind organizing this. My question is, do any artists come to mind, who are really inspiring you in the way they're approaching their exhibition design, beyond your own work, beyond in your own institution, folks that you look up to? Even though I realize we are all learning, this is an emergent area as a collective, but I'm wondering, any folks to look up to, any artists who inspire you?
I think that I am most inspired by like my peers working in this subject. So definitely, you know, Devin, Laura, everyone at A+CA, Galleries Commit, GCCLA. When it comes to thinking about artists, I have to admit I'm like a little bit of an anti-social person, and I'm not always like going out and looking at artwork, but I am impressed by a few artists we represent um, who do raise questions about sustainability in advance of exhibitions. I'm thinking of one artist we represent who really asked us to align his solo show that he was having at the gallery with other kind of events he had going on in the US so that he could minimize the amount of time that he was traveling here. And what I appreciated about that question was that like that hadn't really come to mind for me, that like, oh, artists traveling all around the world for their exhibitions creates a footprint. So I definitely was like impressed and inspired by his mindfulness there.
Siobhan, we have a few questions in the chat. One from Simone. Which eco-friendly material do you use for wrapping artworks besides reused crates? And then there was another question about favorite alternative to foam core mounting.
Okay, so for eco-friendly material, besides reused crates, what we have been doing here at the gallery is using packing blankets. So that's kind of reduced the amount of sheet plastic that we've had to use. Eco Enclose offers like a lot of different papers and paper-based, I don't know how you'd call it, like paper-based bubble wrap equivalent. We've been using that as well. And then of course we have to use sheet plastic. It's not avoidable yet. And so we have been using alternative recycling programs for the sheet plastic. And then favorite alternative to foam core mounting. I don't have an answer. I'm sorry. If anyone else does, it would be great to hear, but I don't have an answer for that one.
Yeah, it seems like we've got a good group. So if anyone has that information, feel free to pop it in the chat. I have a feeling someone does. And then one last question from Ellen. I heard that in a life cycle assessment, that reusable crates, especially turtle crates, oh, my chat is moving, actually score much worse than custom-made wooden crates. The question is, has this been adjusted? And I don't know, Siobhan, if you can answer that. I think maybe some other folks might be able to do that as well.
So I had heard that statistic about other products, which I chose not to mention today. But through working with Simone Paz, my understanding was that the reusable crates ultimately are better than bespoke wooden crates for individual shipments.
And a question from Stephanie on the reusable QR code. How does that work? Maybe you can break that process down again.
Sure. So we use, I think the website's called QR code generator, something like that, qrcodegenerator.com. And so it produces a QR code and you update the hyperlink. And so we've never updated the QR code. We only go online and update the hyperlink for each one of our shows, which means the same QR code has been hanging up in our gallery since January. And we do that for art fairs as well. Yeah, which has been helpful too. Yeah, and Laura, I do think Rockbox, I feel like they did kind of do a really thorough life cycle analysis on their product. So yeah, worth looking into.
Yeah, I know that was a priority for the Rockbox crate. I think some of the early reusable crates that were initially on the market were designed not specifically for climate reasons to reduce impact, but to have like a long-lasting crate. So some of the initial products weren't necessarily intending to have like a shorter life cycle carbon analysis, and some of the newer ones, as well as some new offerings from those original companies, are really prioritizing making sure that that LCA comes out in a more sustainable way than a one-off crate.
Well, wonderful. Great to see you all. Thanks for coming, and have a great day.